You're watching Reuters TV. Here are your top stories.
Turkey's Erdogan claims victory amid voter fraud allegations.
Over 110 people killed in Syria convoy blast.
A Trumpified Judas goes up in flames in Mexico.
This is Reuters Now.
Turkey's President Erdogan declaring victory Sunday in a referendum to grant him sweeping new powers in the biggest overhaul of modern Turkish politics. The latest results show Erdogan winning by a razor-thin margin, with roughly 51% of people voting yes. Turkey's mainly Kurdish southeast and its three main cities, including Ankara and Istanbul, look set to vote no. 3 people shot dead at a polling station in a southeast province, reportedly during a dispute over how they were voting. The country's main opposition party demanding a recount, saying the referendum was marred by irregularities. Adding to suspicions, Turkey's High Electoral Board making a last-minute decision to count ballots that hadn't been stamped by an official as valid. If the vote holds, Turkey's parliamentary system will be replaced by an all-powerful president, tightening Erdogan's grip on the country. Turkey has been under a state of emergency since a failed coup attempt last July. Erdogan responded with a crackdown that has seen 47,000 people detained and 120,000 sacked or suspended from their jobs. More than 300 demonstrators taking to the streets of Istanbul, banging pots and pans to protest the outcome of the referendum. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Erdogan celebrated with his supporters.
Following an attack on an evacuee bus convoy in Syria on Saturday, it's been reported that at least 112 people have lost their lives. A vehicle filled with explosives hit the convoy from government-held towns near Aleppo. The UK-based group, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, says 98 evacuees were killed, along with aid workers and rebel soldiers. The bus convoy had evacuated people from 2 Shiite villages the day before, in a deal between the warring sides. But thousands of people were stuck at 2 transit points on the city's outskirts after the agreement had stalled. Shortly after, the explosion hit. While many are still being treated for their injuries, later on Saturday the deal resumed, and families arrived at their destinations after waiting more than 28 hours to cross into government-held areas.
North Korea's show of force falling flat, a ballistic missile launch failing just after liftoff on Sunday. U.S. Pacific Command says it, quote, blew up almost immediately off the Korean Peninsula's east coast. The missile exploded only hours before U.S. Vice President Mike Pence touched down in South Korea for talks over the North's weapons program. And just a day after a proud North Korean military parade that seemed to showcase a new type of ballistic missile. A White House advisor traveling with Pence tried to diffuse tension, telling Reuters the launch came as no surprise and that they believe the weapon was a medium-range missile that flew for 4 or 5 seconds. Seoul had stronger words, saying the double display of strength, quote, threatened the whole world.
If there are any further provocations, including nuclear tests or ICBMs, we warn once more that strong punitive measures will be taken.
For North Korea's part, the timing suggests deliberate defiance to American pressure, including the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group en route to the area, and recent warnings from major ally and neighbor China. Pyongyang has threatened a nuclear strike against the U.S. if provoked, and says it has developed a missile that could deliver the payload. However, experts believe it's some ways off from mastering that technology.
Pope Francis denounced oppressive regimes in his Easter message Sunday and called for world leaders to prevent the spread of conflict. In his annual Easter Sunday Mass, his 5th as Catholic leader, the Pope addressed tens of thousands of people in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The area was under significant security measures following recent vehicle attacks against pedestrians in London and Stockholm. In his traditional Urbi et Orbi message, Francis spoke of a world lacerated by conflicts and laced with tensions, without naming any specific governments.
Nelle complesse e talvolta drammatiche In the complex and often dramatic situations of today's world, may the risen Lord guide the steps of all those who work for justice and peace. May He grant the leaders of nations the courage they need to prevent the spread of conflicts and to put a halt to the arms trade.
He also referred to the beloved and martyred Syria, condemning an attack on a bus convoy of evacuees outside Aleppo Saturday, which reportedly killed over 100 people. The Pope often uses services during Holy Week and throughout the year to draw attention to the plight of war victims, refugees and migrants.
Yeah, sorry about that, man. Listen, man. Like I said, I killed 13, so I'm working on 14 as we speak. I'm just running around hating mother, man. I just snapped, man. You know, and there's some whole that I would let a or anybody get me on my hookup. But see, the thing is, man, I'm 37, and all my life, man, I just always been a monster, man. Always had to prove myself. You know, always had to take the butts of people's jokes. And it's like, you know, I'm a case manager for Beach Book. I got my beach. I'm killing with my Beach Book badge on too. Oh yeah, I ain't gonna be able to come to work tomorrow.
President Trump's national security advisor meeting top Afghan officials in Kabul Sunday, just days after the U.S. dropped the so-called mother of all bombs on an underground network of tunnels used by Islamic State militants in the eastern part of the country. H.R. McMaster's visit marks the first high-level meeting with Afghan leaders since unleashing the controversial non-nuclear bomb last week, one of the largest conventional combat weapons, which Afghan officials believe killed nearly 100 militants and no civilians. Meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and top officials to talk security and counterterrorism, McMaster pledged support and cooperation with Kabul, even hinting at a troop surge to bolster the nearly 9,000 U.S. troops stationed there, without outlining an official plan. Last week's strike drew condemnation from former Afghan President Hamid Karzai and has led to speculation that Trump's defense advisors are planning to escalate the war against militants in the country.
A better-than-expected outcome for China's first economic health check of 2017. Data out on Monday showing growth of 6.9% in the first quarter, the fastest rate in more than a year. Government spending on infrastructure and a frenzied housing market are driving the numbers, which are at the upper end of Beijing's target after 2016's growth came in at the lowest rate since the early 90s. Chinese data has been looking good overall this year, but many economists fear there could be cracks appearing behind the upbeat numbers. They say the effects of earlier stimulus measures are likely to fade as the year goes on, and that red-hot housing prices are showing signs of overheating, with more and more local authorities stepping up the battle to rein them in.
It's official. As of Friday, Apple has a permit to test self-driving cars in California, the clearest signal yet of Tim Cook's ambitions to dive into the business. Apple now joins a list of companies from traditional car makers like GM to tech giants such as Google, already testing their self-driving vehicles on public roads in California. Reuters correspondent Alexandria Sage on the phone from San Francisco.
Most of the companies working on self-driving cars have research and development labs in Silicon Valley. That's why having a permit in California to drive on its roads is so important. That list of companies who have a permit is growing. It includes such companies as Volkswagen and Mercedes and Tesla, as well as a whole host of startups that you've never heard of who are all trying to work on this technology.
Many companies believe the first cars will launch in 2020, but some experts say it may take much longer due to regulatory concerns. Apple executives have been coy about their interest in cars, with even Cook suggesting that Apple wants to move beyond integration of smartphones into vehicle infotainment systems. Apple was not immediately available for comment.
Doors open to the New York International Auto Show Friday, and in the Big Apple, that means luxury models are on full display, including 2 new Porsches that have enough style to make the ordinary man feel like the next James Bond. Ford's upscale Lincoln nameplate turning the Navigator Raptor, a concept of a few years ago, into a real-life luxury mega SUV. Another in the bigger is better category, the Infiniti QX80, which is ditching shiny paint in favor of a matte look. The hottest selling category right now, compact SUVs, where Hyundai is looking to get a piece of the action through the Genesis luxury brand, but it's not yet ready to hit the road. What is ready? Mercedes-Benz and the GLC 63. Mercedes hoping to regain lost ground in its premium market, which is clearly much more crowded than it used to be. I'm Conway Gittins in New York. Underneath all this shiny chrome, there's more concern than there was at the Detroit Auto Show just a few months ago. That's because U.S. sales are starting to stall after a record sales boom. But without high gas prices to worry about or the threat of higher fuel standards from a Trump White House, high-end models just keep on coming.
U.S. President Donald Trump has risen in Mexico City, and for a second straight year, this Trumpified Judas effigy was blown to smithereens. Easter revelers watched with joy as the ritualistic burning lit up the sky. For local residents celebrating this weekend, using Trump as Judas has given them some comic relief.
In spite of all the problems in our country, we Mexicans try to find the humor in our traditions.
Trump was not the only public figure given the Judas treatment. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto was given an effigy with rat ears. Artist Gerardo Diaz says burning them is a chance to punish them for their sins.
Depicting public figures who've committed enormous errors like Donald Trump, it's like burning everything he's done.
A burning that these folks enjoyed without guilt.
You're up to date. Check back later as stories develop.